Caitlin Clark came back from an injury-filled season and immediately looked like the best player in the WNBA. Yet the Indiana Fever front office is reportedly considering the idea of sending her to Los Angeles. Not because she is struggling, not because there are locker room issues, but because one executive has allegedly been planting seeds through social media, public appearances, and a network of basketball connections that all seem to point toward one destination: the LA Sparks. The clues are all there, and when you connect them, a bigger picture starts to emerge. The question is simple: is Indiana making a huge mistake with Caitlin Clark?
Lynn Dunn is out in the public planting the seeds that she's trading Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark 100% will get traded away from the Indiana Fever before Stephanie White gets moved. That is what Lynn Dunn is going out and doing.
Start with the name Corey Close. Most people probably saw her name mentioned and moved on without thinking much about it. She is a highly respected women's basketball coach with an impressive resume, including leading the UCLA Bruins to the most recent women's national championship. Recently, her name started appearing in discussions about the LA Sparks head coaching vacancy, which is completely normal. Coaches are linked to open jobs every offseason. That part is not unusual. What caught people's attention was who seemed to be helping amplify those conversations. Lynn Dunn, a senior executive within the Indiana Fever organization, kept appearing in the same discussions, public panels, and social media conversations where both the Sparks and Corey Close were being mentioned. Dunn is not simply a retired basketball figure sharing opinions online. As a former general manager and head coach who helped bring Indiana its only WNBA championship, she remains an influential voice within the Fever organization. Because of that, her involvement in conversations surrounding another franchise's coaching search raised some eyebrows.
Lynn Dunn joined the panel here of coaches and executives, etc. And she's planting the seeds in the ground that, I've had to make big decisions of getting rid of star players before. And it's tough when you got to make the decision to get rid of a star player, but sometimes it's what you have to do for culture. Lynn Dunn is planting the seeds, bro. Dan Dockage didn't come out of nowhere saying all of this stuff, y'all. The writing is on the wall.
Now you have a Fever executive publicly connected to discussions involving a franchise that many people believe could eventually try to acquire Caitlin Clark. That is not the type of coincidence that fans easily ignore. What makes it more interesting is that it appears to be a pattern rather than a single isolated moment. Dunn's social media activity, her public appearances, and her professional relationships all seem to point in the same direction when viewed together. Adding to the speculation is her long-standing relationship with media personality Dan Dakich, who has openly stated that he receives information from sources inside the Indiana Fever organization and has publicly expressed support for Dunn. As a result, many of Dunn's public comments reach an audience already paying close attention to everything involving the Fever. Dakich has also been critical of Clark, describing her as difficult and suggesting that she has benefited greatly from the organization's system. Because he has acknowledged connections to Fever insiders, his comments carry additional weight for some observers. So when Dunn appeared on a panel called The Daily Coach and spoke about having to remove a superstar player for cultural and academic reasons, some listeners felt those comments sounded different given the people involved and the context surrounding them.
When I go into an environment, when I go to evaluate a player or coach or whatever, I want to see, hear, and feel that culture. And so I think about sometimes culture is kind of like you have to plant it, you have to grow it, and you have to maintain it. And it's a little bit like a garden. Sometimes you have to weed it. You may have some problems with some weeds taking over your culture, and you have to plop them out and pick them out and let them go.
Sometimes you got to plop them out, pick them out, and let them go.
During that same panel discussion, Dunn used a gardening analogy that attracted even more attention. She explained that sometimes organizations need to weed the garden, and that one of the hardest decisions can be moving a player who does not fit the culture that has been created within the team. According to Dunn, these decisions often come down to behavior and cultural fit. Since Caitlin Clark is currently the only true superstar on the Fever roster, many people immediately connected those comments to her, whether that was Dunn's intention or not. Of course, Dunn cannot make a trade on her own because owner Herb Simon and the team's leadership structure have authority above her. However, critics argue that she does not need to make the decision directly if she continues to publicly promote the idea of culture and fit whenever the opportunity arises. Over time, those messages can influence how other people within the organization view a player and eventually shape larger decisions.
That's probably the toughest thing is when you have to let a player go or trade a player or cut a player because they don't fit into your culture that you've created. And it all goes back to behavior.
It all goes back to behavior. The toughest thing is when you got to trade a player, cut a player, and it all goes back to behavior.
Sophie Cunningham has been in this league long enough to recognize when a team is being set up to fail. When she publicly spoke about Indiana's defense, she was not simply venting after a disappointing loss. She was pointing out a specific structural problem and putting it on record. What she said was straightforward. One of the biggest issues hurting the team is that they are only using one defensive scheme. In a league as competitive as the WNBA, that approach simply does not work. Opposing teams study film constantly, and by the third week of the season, every coaching staff knows exactly what you're doing. Indiana continues to rely on the same switch-heavy defensive system, and opponents keep attacking the same weaknesses game after game. What many people missed was what Cunningham said next. She explained that the Fever actually had around 10 different defensive schemes in their playbook last season, but they are not using them now. That means the team is not lacking options. It has simply been reduced to one option. When asked why, Cunningham was direct. If players cannot properly execute a scheme, coaches cannot use it. She also explained that even if a system is available, it falls apart when only some players can execute it while others cannot. As a result, Indiana has become stuck running one defensive style because the coaching staff either cannot or will not get the entire roster comfortable with anything else. Young players such as Raven Johnson and Michaela Timpson are still learning the system, which is understandable. However, the problem is not simply that they need more time. The problem is that the one defensive approach they are learning only works when opponents do not know it is coming. At this stage of the season, every team in the league knows exactly what Indiana plans to do. Through the first 8 games, the Fever averaged 91.8 points per game, the best offense in the league, while allowing 89 points per game on defense, one of the WAR.